I returned 2 days early and found my kitchen in ruins. My sister said, "We're renovating before moving in." I kicked her out. That night, cameras caught her pouring gasoline on my porch. I hit the alarm button and watched her life end. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, grab a warm cup of tea and get comfortable. I'd love to know what time of day you're watching this video. Please comment M for morning, A for afternoon, or E for evening. Now, let me take you into this story. There are moments in life that split your timeline into two distinct parts, everything that happened before, and everything that comes after. For me, that moment wasn't a car crash or a sudden diagnosis. It was the smell of pulverized drywall and the screech of a power drill tearing through the sanctuary I had spent my entire adult life building. I had just landed after a 14-hour flight from London. My body was aching, my eyes were burning from the dry cabin air, and all I wanted was silence. I had wrapped up a grueling international consulting project 2 days early. I didn't tell anyone. I just wanted to surprise myself with 48 hours of uninterrupted sleep in my own bed, surrounded by my own things. But as my Uber pulled up to my suburban driveway, the silence I craved was nowhere to be found. There were 2 white vans parked on my lawn, not on the driveway, but actually on the grass I paid a landscaping service to maintain. My front door was wide open. And coming from inside my house was the unmistakable sound of construction. Hammering. Drilling. Men shouting instructions. My first thought was that I had the wrong address. I actually checked my phone to make sure the driver hadn't dropped me off at a neighbor's house. But no, there was my mailbox. There was the oak tree I loved. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. Was it a burglary? But burglars don't bring power tools and park vans on the lawn. I dragged my suitcase out of the car, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I walked up the path, and that's when the smell hit me. It was a mix of sawdust, unwashed bodies, and something that smelled like cheap cologne. I stepped through the open front door. "What exactly are you doing here?" My voice came out lower and calmer than I expected, though my hands were trembling. The scene before me was a nightmare. My living room, usually a pristine space with minimalist furniture and warm wood accents, was covered in plastic tarps. But the real horror was beyond the archway. My kitchen, my beautiful, custom-designed Italian kitchen with the hand-painted tiles I had selected one by one, was gone. The walls were ripped open. Pipes were dangling like exposed intestines. The island counter was smashed. And standing in the middle of this devastation, holding a blueprint and pointing at a worker who was currently sledgehammering my cabinets, was my younger sister, Tiffany. She looked up as I spoke, and for a split second, she looked surprised. But it wasn't the look of a deer in headlights. It was the annoyance of a child caught with her hand in the cookie jar, bothered only because she had to explain herself. "Oh, Mallory. You're back early," she chirped, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Surprise!" She stepped over a pile of rubble that used to be my breakfast nook. Beside her, her husband, Derek, was leaning against a wall that hadn't been demolished yet, scrolling on his phone. And sitting on my brand-new velvet sofa, with his dirty work boots resting on the coffee table, was Tiffany's father-in-law, Frank. He was drinking a beer. My beer. Surprise? I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Tiffany, why is there a man with a sledgehammer destroying my house?" Tiffany waved her hand dismissively, the diamond on her ring catching the light, a ring I knew Derek couldn't actually afford. "Don't be dramatic, Mal," she said, closing the distance between us. "We're renovating." The layout of this kitchen was terrible for a family. We needed an open concept for when we move in next month. "Look, I saved the backsplash you liked, but frankly, it wasn't practical for a baby." I blinked, trying to process the insanity of her sentence. "Move in? What are you talking about?" Frank burped loudly from the sofa. "Hey, keep it down, will you?" I'm watching the game. He didn't even look at me. He just gestured with the beer bottle for me to move out of the way of the TV. The sheer audacity of it made the world tilt on its axis. I looked at the destroyed walls, the shattered tiles, and then at the muddy footprints tracked all over my hardwood floors. Among them, I spotted a pair of neon pink designer sneakers lying near the door, shoes Tiffany had been begging me to buy for her birthday last month. I didn't authorize this, I said, my voice rising. I didn't agree to anyone moving in. I didn't agree to a renovation. Get these people out of my house. Tiffany rolled her eyes and sighed, looking at Derek for support. See? I told you she'd be uptight about it. Mallory, we're family. Derek's folks sold their place, and we're all going to live here together. It's a big house, you're never here because of your job, and honestly, you don't need all this space for one person. It's selfish. Selfish? I whispered. Yeah, selfish, Frank grunted, finally looking at me with eyes that were cold and calculating. You got plenty of money. Family helps family. Now stop making a scene and go unpack or something. I looked at the three of them. My sister, the princess. Her husband, the leech. And his father, the bully. They looked at me not with fear, but with an absolute, terrifying sense of entitlement. They truly believed they owned my life. I gripped the handle of my suitcase until my knuckles turned white. I knew, in that moment, that shouting wouldn't work. Crying wouldn't work. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a hostile takeover. I am giving you, I said, checking my watch, exactly 60 seconds to get every single worker out of my house before I call the police. Frank laughed. A dry, barking sound. You wouldn't dare call the cops on family. Don't bluff, little girl. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and dialed 911, holding the screen up so they could see the numbers. Try me. Before the operator could even pick up, I saw Derek's face change. The smirk vanished. But Tiffany? Tiffany just narrowed her eyes, and I saw a flash of hatred so pure it made my stomach turn. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. While I stood there, phone in hand, waiting for the dispatcher to answer, my mind didn't stay in the dusty chaos of my living room. It snapped back 15 years, to a different house, a different broken mess, but the exact same feeling of helplessness. I was 20, home from college for the summer. Tiffany was 17. I was in the kitchen studying for a final exam when I heard a crash from the living room. It was the sound of porcelain shattering, a sound that makes your heart stop because you know, instinctively, that something irreplaceable is gone. I ran in to find our mother's antique Ming vase, an inheritance from her grandmother and the only valuable thing she owned, lying in 1,000 blue and white shards on the floor. Tiffany was standing over it, a lacrosse stick in her hand. She had been practicing inside, something Mom had forbidden 1,000 times. When Mom's car pulled into the driveway a minute later, Tiffany turned to me. Her eyes were wide, filling with fake tears instantly. You have to take the blame, Mallory. What? No way, I had argued. You did it. You were playing ball inside. If you don't take the blame, Tiffany whispered, her voice dropping to a hiss, I'll tell Mom and Dad about the party you went to last week. I'll tell them you were drinking. They'll pull your tuition funding. It was a lie. I hadn't been drinking, but I knew our parents. They were strict, terrified of scandal, and they always believed Tiffany. She was the fragile one. The baby. I was the eldest, the sturdy one, the one who could take it. When Mom walked in and saw the vase, she screamed. It was a sound of pure heartbreak. Before I could even open my mouth to defend myself, Tiffany threw herself into Mom's arms, sobbing hysterically. I tried to stop her. Tiffany wailed, pointing a shaking finger at me. Mallory was dancing around and she knocked it over. I told her to be careful. Mom looked at me. Her eyes were red, filled with disappointment that cut deeper than any physical blow. Mallory? Is this true? You know how much this meant to me. Mom, I didn't. Stop lying. Dad roared, entering the room behind her. Look at your sister. She's a mess. Why would she lie? You're the older one. You should be responsible. I took the punishment. I spent the summer grounded, working double shifts at a diner to pay for a restoration that never really fixed the cracks. Tiffany spent the summer at lacrosse camp, smiling and carefree. That was the dynamic. That was the law of our universe. Mallory sacrifices, Tiffany consumes. Mallory fixes, Tiffany breaks. But the real chain that bound me to her wasn't forged in childhood incidents like the vase. It was welded shut 5 years ago, in a sterile hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and dying flowers. Mom was in the final stages of cancer. She was so small in that hospital bed, her skin like paper. Dad had passed away 2 years prior from a heart attack, leaving Mom drifting and fragile. Tiffany was there, but she spent most of the time in the hallway on her phone, complaining to her friends about how depressing the hospital was. I was the one holding Mom's hand when she woke up for the last time. She squeezed my fingers with surprising strength. Mallory, she rasped, her breath rattling in her chest. Promise me. Anything, Mom, I cried. Your sister, she's not like you. She's not strong. She can't handle the world alone. Mom's eyes were frantic, pleading. Promise me you'll always look after her. Don't let her fall. You're the big sister. It's your job. Family is everything. Promise me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say that Tiffany was a grown woman who made terrible choices. I wanted to say that Tiffany was mean, manipulative, and ungrateful. But you don't argue with a dying woman. You don't deny a mother her final piece. I promise, I sobbed. I'll take care of her. I won't let her fall. Mom smiled, closed her eyes, and died an hour later. That promise became my prison. It was the reason I paid Tiffany's rent when she forgot to work for a month. It was the reason I bailed Derek out the first time he got arrested for a bar fight. It was the reason I tolerated their snide comments, their lack of gratitude, their constant demands. But as I stood in my destroyed kitchen, looking at Tiffany's smug face, I realized something terrifying. Mom had asked me to protect Tiffany from the world. She hadn't asked me to let Tiffany burn my world to the ground. The memory of the vase and the memory of the deathbed promise clashed in my mind. For 15 years, I had been trying to glue the pieces of Tiffany's life together, just like that porcelain. But today, standing in the wreckage of my own home, I realized I had run out of glue. The operator's voice came through the phone, tinny and distant. 911, what is your emergency? I looked at Tiffany. I'd like to report a break-in, I said, my voice steady. And acts of vandalism in progress. To understand why the sight of my destroyed kitchen felt like a physical assault, you have to understand what this house represented. It wasn't just wood and brick. It was the physical manifestation of my survival. After Mom died, I threw myself into my career with a ferocity that scared some people. I worked for a top-tier consulting firm, specializing in crisis management for failing corporations. It was high-stress, high-stakes work. I spent my days in boardrooms full of shouting men, navigating legal minefields, and making decisions that affected thousands of employees' salaries. I lived out of suitcases. I ate room service dinners alone at 11 p.m. I missed birthdays, weddings, and holidays. I saved every penny of my salary and my bonuses. I drove a 10-year-old car. I wore the same 5 suits. While Tiffany was blowing her small inheritance on trips to Cabo and designer handbags, I was building a war chest. 3 years ago, I bought the house. It was a fixer-upper in a quiet, leafy suburb, the kind of place where neighbors actually waved to each other. It had good bones but needed love. And for the first time in my life, I had love to give to something that wouldn't reject it. I designed the renovation myself. I wanted it to be the opposite of the chaotic, loud home I grew up in, and the sterile hotels I slept in. I wanted warmth. I wanted light. The kitchen was the heart of it. I had flown to a salvage yard in Vermont to find reclaimed barnwood for the beams. I had spent weekends scrutinizing samples of marble for the countertops. The tiles that Tiffany had just destroyed? They were hand-painted ceramics I had ordered from a small artisan shop in Portugal, waiting 6 months for them to arrive. But the real soul of the house was the garden. Gardening became my therapy. It was the only time my brain stopped analyzing data and just breathed. I spent my weekends on my knees in the dirt, planting, pruning, and nurturing. I planted a row of hydrangeas along the front porch, big, billowing clouds of blue and purple. They were Mom's favorite flower. Every time I watered them, I felt a connection to the gentle, loving version of her, not the stressed woman who forced me to enable my sister. I built a trellis for Jasmine to climb, filling the evening air with a scent that made me sleep better than any sleeping pill. I planted a Japanese maple tree in the center of the yard, watching it turn a fiery red every autumn. This house was my sanctuary. It was the one place on earth where I didn't have to be Mallory the fixer or Mallory the crisis manager. Here, I was just Mallory. I could walk around in my pajamas, drink tea, and read a book in a sunbeam without anyone demanding money or attention. It was the proof that I was valid. That I was capable. That I deserved nice things. Tiffany hated it. The first time she visited, shortly after the renovation was finished, she walked through the rooms with a sneer on her face. "It's a bit empty, isn't it?" she had said, running a finger over my dust-free mantelpiece. "It looks like a museum. Not very cozy." "I like the space," I had replied, ignoring the barb. "Must be lonely," she said, flopping onto my sofa. "All this room and just you. It's kind of a waste, really. You know, Derek and I are squeezed into that tiny apartment. We barely have room for our clothes." "You have plenty of room, Tiffany. You just have too many clothes," I said gently. She glared at me. "You always judge me. You think you're better than us just because you have a fancy job and a big house. But you know what? You're cold. That's why you're single. No man wants a woman who cares more about her tile grout than having a family." That comment stung, as she knew it would. But I let it slide. I always let it slide. Now, looking at the devastation, I realized that her hatred of my house wasn't just jealousy. It was resentment. She resented that I had created peace for myself. She resented that I hadn't used my money to upgrade her life. By destroying my kitchen, she wasn't just renovating. She was trying to erase me from my own home. She was trying to paint over my taste, my choices, and my hard work with her own chaotic, entitled vision. She wanted to turn my sanctuary into another version of the messy, loud, dysfunctional environment she thrived in. And seeing Frank's muddy boots on the coffee table, right next to a coaster he refused to use, I felt a level of violation that went deeper than property damage. They had invaded my safe space. They had brought the chaos I had spent 15 years running from right into my living room. If my life was a meticulously built structure of hard work and discipline, Tiffany's life was a teetering tower of bad decisions held together by other people's money. She married Derek 4 years ago. Derek was charming, in a used car salesman sort of way. He had a smile that was all teeth and eyes that never quite focused on you. He claimed to be an entrepreneur, which I quickly learned was code for unemployed with expensive hobbies. From the moment they said I do, their financial crises became a recurring seasonal event, like the flu. First, it was the investment opportunity in a crypto mining rig that turned out to be a scam. They lost $20,000, money that was supposed to be for a down payment on a house. Who paid their rent for the next 6 months to keep them from being evicted? I did. Then came the medical emergency. Tiffany called me in tears, saying Derek needed urgent dental surgery that their insurance wouldn't cover. I wired the money immediately. 2 weeks later, I saw photos on Facebook of them vacationing in Cancun, flashing blindingly white veneers and drinking top-shelf tequila. When I confronted her, she said, "Self-care is part of recovery, Mallory. Why are you so stingy?" Frank, Derek's father, was the architect behind much of this entitlement. Frank was a man who believed the world owed him a living. He had lost his own house years ago due to gambling debts and had been bouncing between relatives ever since. He latched onto Tiffany and Derek like a barnacle, filling their heads with toxic ideas. I remember a dinner about 6 months ago. We were at a restaurant, my treat, of course. Frank was picking his teeth with a credit card receipt. "So, Mallory," Frank started, leaning in. "I hear you got a promotion. Senior partner, right? Big salary bump?" "It's a lot more responsibility," I said guardedly, taking a sip of water. That's great," Frank nodded. "You know, Derek here has a brilliant idea for a sports bar. High concept. Just needs a little seed capital. 50 grand. Small change for a big shot like you." "I'm not investing in a bar, Frank," I said firmly. "It's not investing, it's family." Tiffany chimed in, her eyes wide. "Derek is so unhappy at his delivery job. He's depressed, Mal. Do you want your brother-in-law to be depressed? If you helped him start this business, he could be his own boss. It would solve all our problems." "Tiffany, $50,000 isn't small change. And restaurants have a high failure rate," I tried to use logic. "See?" Derek slammed his hand on the table, startling the waiter. "She doesn't believe in me. She thinks I'm a loser. She wants us to fail so she can feel superior." "That's not what I said." "You hoard your money," Tiffany spat, her face twisting into that familiar ugly sneer. "You have no kids. No husband. Who are you saving it for? You're going to die alone with your money, Mallory. Meanwhile, we're struggling to build a future. We want to have kids, but we can't afford it. You're holding our future hostage." That was their narrative. In their minds, my bank account was a communal pot that I was unfairly guarding. They didn't see the 80-hour work weeks. They didn't see the missed holidays. They only saw the result, and they felt entitled to it. Recently, the desperation had ramped up. I knew from mutual acquaintances that Derek was in trouble again. Real trouble. Not just credit card debt, but the kind of debt where people start making threatening phone calls. I had heard whispers about gambling again. They had come to me a month ago, asking for a loan of $100,000. They claimed it was to buy a house in a cheaper district so they could stop renting. "Think of it as an early inheritance," Tiffany had joked, though her eyes were dead serious. "Or a college fund for your future niece or nephew." "Are you pregnant?" I had asked. "We're trying," she said evasively. "But we can't raise a baby in our apartment." I had said no. For the first time, I gave a hard, definitive no. I told them I was putting my money into my own retirement and home improvements. I told them they needed to live within their means. Tiffany hadn't screamed. She hadn't cried. She had just gone very, very quiet. "Okay," she had said, a strange, blank smile on her face. "I understand. You have to prioritize your house. It's very important to you." Now, standing in the ruins of my kitchen, I understood that silence. She hadn't accepted my refusal. She had taken it as a declaration of war. If I wouldn't give them the money to buy their own house, they would simply take mine. And Frank? He was the general directing the troops. He saw a single woman with a big house and too much money, and in his twisted worldview, I was just prey waiting to be eaten. They viewed my kindness as weakness, and my no as a temporary obstacle to be bulldozed, literally. The realization of how they got in hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. It wasn't a picked lock. It wasn't a broken window, at least, not initially. It was a betrayal wrapped in a hug. It happened at Thanksgiving, just 2 weeks ago. I had hosted, as usual. I spent 3 days prepping. I roasted a 20-pound turkey, made 3 different kinds of stuffing, and baked pies from scratch. I wanted it to be perfect. I always wanted it to be perfect, chasing the ghost of the family dinners we had before Mom got sick. Tiffany and Derek arrived 2 hours late, smelling faintly of pot smoke, with Frank in tow. They didn't bring a side dish, despite promising to bring the wine. Traffic was hell, Derek mumbled, dropping onto the sofa and turning on the football game immediately. But Tiffany was acting differently that night. Usually, she sat on her phone while I cooked and cleaned. That night, she was helpful. Suspiciously helpful. "Let me help you with the cleanup, Mal," she insisted after dinner, shooing me away from the sink. "You cooked all day. Go sit down. Have a glass of wine with Frank." I was touched. I genuinely thought she was trying to bridge the gap after our argument about the money. I thought, maybe she's growing up. Maybe she finally appreciates me. "Thank you, Tiff," I said, giving her a side hug. "That really means a lot." I went into the living room, leaving my purse on the kitchen counter. My purse, which contained my keyring. My keyring, which held the house key, the car key, and the office key. I sat with Frank and Derek for about 20 minutes, enduring Frank's unsolicited advice on how I should invest my salary. "Crypto is the future, darling, cash is trash." When I went back into the kitchen to get dessert, Tiffany was standing by the counter. She jumped a little when I walked in. Her hand was hovering near my purse. "Oh," she laughed, a little too loudly. "I was just looking for a mint. Do you have any gum?" "In the side pocket," I said, not thinking anything of it. "Found it." She pulled her hand back, clutching a pack of gum. "Hey, thanks for letting me help. The kitchen looks great, by the way. You have such nice stuff." She looked around the room, her eyes lingering on the high-end appliances, the custom cabinetry. It wasn't admiration in her eyes, though. It was assessment. Like she was mentally calculating the resale value of my toaster. "I'm going on a trip next week," I mentioned casually as I plated the pie. "London. Big project." "Oh, really?" Derek's voice piped up from the other room. He suddenly sounded interested. "How long?" 2 weeks. "Maybe longer," I said. "It's going to be intense." 2 weeks, Tiffany repeated slowly. She exchanged a look with Derek through the archway. A look I didn't catch at the time, but replaying it now, it was glaringly obvious. It was the look of a predator realizing the zookeeper was leaving the cage unlocked. "Who's watching the house?" Frank asked, mouthful of pie. "I have a security system," I said. "And the neighbors keep an eye out." "You should let us check on it," Tiffany said quickly. "Water the plants. Bring in the mail. You know, family stuff." "I'll be fine," I smiled. "But thanks for offering." I didn't give her the key. I never gave her a spare key. I knew better than that. But that night, while she was cleaning up, while she was looking for gum, she must have taken my keys. There was a hardware store just 3 blocks away that had a self-service key copying kiosk. It would have taken her 10 minutes to run out the back door, drive there, copy the key, and come back while I was being lectured by Frank in the living room. Or maybe she just took a photo of the key-biting code. Derek was tech-savvy when it came to scams. Or simpler, she swiped the spare key I kept in the junk drawer, the one I thought I had hidden under a pile of takeout menus. I walked over to the junk drawer now, amidst the rubble of my kitchen. I yanked it open. It was empty. Not just the key, the whole drawer had been dumped out. You stole it, I said, turning back to face them in the present. The 911 operator was still on the line, asking if I was in immediate danger. I didn't steal anything. Tiffany scoffed, crossing her arms. I borrowed it. At Thanksgiving. You left it right there. I figured you forgot to give it to me. Since you were going away for so long, it was irresponsible not to leave a key with family. I was doing you a favor. A favor? I choked out. You copied my key behind my back so you could break in and destroy my house? We didn't break in. Derek yelled. We used a key. That means we have permission. That is not how the law works, you idiot. I screamed. It was the first time I had ever raised my voice at them like that. The sound shocked us all into silence for a second. I'm on the phone with the police, I said into the silence. They are asking if there are intruders in the home. I am about to say yes. The air in the room changed instantly. The mention of the police moving from a threat to an active reality cut through their arrogance like a knife. The construction workers, 2 men in dusty overalls who had been awkwardly standing by the demolished island, looked at each other. They weren't part of this family drama. They were just guys hired for a job. Excuse me, ma'am, the older worker said, stepping forward. He held a sledgehammer loosely at his side. We were told this lady, he pointed at Tiffany, was the owner. She signed the contract. She lied, I said, my voice icy. I am the owner. My name is on the deed. My name is on the mortgage. This woman is my sister, and she has no legal right to this property. If you continue to work, you are aiding and abetting a felony. I suggest you pack up your tools and leave immediately. I will not be paying you, and if you damage 1 more inch of my house, I will sue your company into bankruptcy. The worker's face went pale. He looked at Tiffany, then back at me. He saw the suitcase, the business suit, the sheer rage radiating off me. He dropped the sledgehammer onto a tarp. We're done here, he muttered to his partner. Let's go. Hey! You can't leave. Tiffany shrieked, grabbing the man's arm. I paid you a deposit. You have to finish the demo. Lady, I ain't going to jail for your family dispute, the man shook her off. Sort it out yourselves. They started packing up their drills and saws with record speed. This is ridiculous. Frank stood up from the sofa, knocking over his beer bottle. It foamed onto my rug, my vintage Persian rug. You're kicking out the workers? Who's gonna fix this mess? You are going to pay to fix it, I said, staring him down. Every single cent. We don't have money. Derek shouted. That's the whole point. We spent the last of our savings on the deposit for these guys. We gave up our apartment lease. We have nowhere to go. You gave up your lease? I repeated, stunned by the stupidity. Because we were moving in here. Tiffany yelled. We figured once the work started, you couldn't say no. What were you going to do? Throw your pregnant sister out on the street? The room went silent. Pregnant? I asked. My eyes dropped to her stomach. She was wearing a tight crop top. Her stomach was flat. We're trying, Tiffany stammered, flushing red. I could be pregnant. Stress is bad for the baby, Mallory. You're endangering my unborn child. You are not pregnant, I stated flatly. And even if you were, that doesn't give you the right to hijack my house. It's not just your house. Frank bellowed, stepping into my personal space. He smelled of stale beer and aggression. It's family property. You got rich while we suffered. It's time to share the wealth. You think you're better than us? You think you're some kind of queen in your castle? You're nothing. Just a lonely, bitter spinster who cares more about tiles than people. He poked a thick finger into my chest. You let us stay. You let them finish the work. Or you're going to regret it. Is that a threat? I asked, looking at his finger, then up at his red, blotchy face. It's a promise, Frank snarled. We know things. We know where you work. Maybe your fancy bosses would like to know how you treat your starving family. Get out, I said. My voice was trembling, not with fear anymore, but with a cold, hard resolve I didn't know I possessed. The police are 3 minutes away. I can hear the sirens. I couldn't actually hear sirens yet, but the lie worked. Derek looked at the window, panic rising in his eyes. He had a record. He couldn't be here when the cops showed up. Dad, Tiff, we gotta go, Derek said, grabbing Tiffany's arm. If the cops come, they'll check my probation. You coward! Tiffany screamed at him, then turned to me. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure ugliness. I hate you. I wish you had died instead of Mom. Mom would have let us stay. Mom loved us. The words hit me like a physical slap. Mom isn't here, I said quietly. And I'm done being her ghost. Come on! Derek dragged Tiffany toward the door. Frank grabbed his jacket, spitting on the floor as he passed me. This ain't over, Frank growled. You don't turn your back on family. You'll pay for this. I watched them stumble out the front door, past the fleeing construction workers. I watched them pile into Derek's beat-up sedan and Frank's truck. Only when their taillights disappeared around the corner did I finally exhale. My knees gave out, and I sank onto the floor, right in the middle of the dust and debris of what used to be my kitchen. The silence that followed their departure was heavier than the noise had been. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the silence of a battlefield after the shooting stops, when you look around and count the bodies. I sat on the floor for 10 minutes, just breathing. The 911 operator had stayed on the line until I confirmed they were gone, advising me to file a report immediately. I told her I would go to the station in the morning. I didn't want officers tramping through my house right now. I felt too exposed, too raw. I stood up and surveyed the damage properly for the first time. The kitchen was a total loss. The cabinets were splinters. The plumbing was exposed. The wiring was hanging loose. It would cost tens of thousands of dollars to fix. But it wasn't the money that made me want to vomit. It was the malice. They hadn't just removed things, they had destroyed them. The tiles weren't just taken down, they were smashed into dust. The countertops were cracked with sledgehammers. It was angry work. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Tiffany. You're a monster. We have nowhere to sleep tonight. I hope you're happy in your big empty house while we freeze. I didn't reply. I blocked her number. Then I blocked Derek. Then Frank. I walked to the front door to lock it, and that's when I saw the second act of vandalism. On my porch, the beautiful hydrangeas, Mom's flowers, were destroyed. They hadn't just been stepped on. Someone had taken a shovel or a boot and deliberately kicked the root balls apart. The purple blooms were scattered across the concrete like bruised confetti. Frank. It had to be Frank. He knew how much I loved that garden. A cold rage settled in my chest. It replaced the fear. It replaced the sadness. It was a clarifying feeling. For years, I had viewed my family as a burden I had to carry, a cross I had to bear because of a promise to a dying woman. I had allowed them to drain my bank account, drain my energy, and insult my life choices because I thought that was what good sisters did. But looking at those crushed flowers, I realized they weren't family. They were parasites. And you don't negotiate with parasites. You exterminate them. I went back inside and grabbed my laptop. I pulled up my bank records. I started printing every transfer I had ever made to them. The loans for rent, the bail money, the medical expenses. Then I pulled up the deed to the house. I found the emails where I had explicitly told them no regarding the money for their house. I was building a case. Not just for the police, but for myself. I needed to see it in black and white. I needed to prove to the part of me that still felt guilty, the part that sounded like my mother, that I was the victim here. My phone buzzed again. An unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then a text came through from the same number. It was Derek. Frank is really mad. He says you disrespected the family hierarchy. He says you need to make it right by tomorrow morning, or he's coming back. And he won't be talking this time. A chill ran down my spine. Family hierarchy. That was Frank's code for Frank is the king and everyone else serves him. I typed a reply. If anyone sets foot on my property again, I will have them arrested for trespassing and harassment. I have cameras. Do not test me. I hit send and blocked that number too. But the mention of cameras gave me pause. I didn't have cameras. I had a basic alarm system on the doors and windows, but no video. I had always valued my privacy. I thought living in a safe neighborhood was enough. I realized how naive I had been. My enemies weren't random burglars looking for a TV. My enemies were people who knew my schedule, knew my weaknesses, and felt entitled to my life. I looked at the clock. It was 4 p.m. The sun was starting to dip lower. The darkness was coming, and with it, the fear that they might return. Derek's threat, "He won't be talking this time," echoed in my head. I wasn't going to be a victim tonight. I grabbed my keys, my car keys were luckily still in my purse, and ran out the door. I drove to the nearest home improvement store with the focus of a soldier on a mission. I bought 4 high-definition security cameras with night vision and motion sensors. I bought floodlights. I bought new deadbolts, heavy-duty ones. I bought digital locks that required a code and a fingerprint, so no key could ever be copied again. I drove home, my trunk rattled with the tools of my defense. I wasn't just fixing a house anymore. I was fortifying a castle. By the time I got back, the sun was setting. The shadows in the living room stretched long and distorted, making the draped plastic sheets look like ghosts. I called a 24-hour locksmith first. I wasn't trusting my own handyman skills with the main entry points. A burly man named Mike arrived 30 minutes later. He took one look at the destruction in the kitchen and whistled. "Bad breakup?" he asked. "Bad sister," I corrected. "That's worse," he nodded sympathetically. "Bloodstains harder than wine." While Mike replaced the deadbolts on the front and back doors with the high-grade digital locks I'd bought, I set to work installing the cameras. I'm not an IT expert, but fear is a great motivator. I climbed the ladder, drilling into the exterior siding. I put one camera facing the driveway, one covering the front porch, one over the back patio, and one hidden in the garage eave. I synced them all to an app on my phone. The image on the screen was crisp. I could see the street clearly. I could see the crushed hydrangeas in high definition. Next, I tackled the floodlights. I set up motion-activated lights that would turn the driveway into a stadium at the slightest movement. If they came back, they wouldn't be able to hide in the dark. By 9 p.m., Mike was gone, and the house was sealed. I was exhausted. I hadn't slept in over 24 hours. My body was screaming for rest, but my mind was wired, buzzing with adrenaline. I couldn't stay in the house alone. It felt too big, too hollowed out. But I refused to leave. Leaving would feel like surrendering. Leaving would give them the opportunity to come back and finish what they started. I dragged my mattress from my bedroom into the living room, away from the windows. I locked the bedroom door behind me, another layer of defense. I made a camp in the center of the floor, surrounded by the only things I could trust: my phone, a baseball bat I kept for emergencies, and a bottle of wine. I sat there, watching the camera feed on my phone. The street was quiet. A neighbor walked a dog. A car drove past slowly. My heart jumped every time headlights swept across the lawn. I started sorting through the pile of papers I had found on the kitchen counter, documents Tiffany had left behind in her haste. There were sketches, crude drawings on napkin backs and notebook paper. I picked one up. It was a layout of my second floor. My home office, the room where I built my career, was labeled nursery. My guest room was labeled Frank's room. My master bedroom was labeled Tiff and Derek. And next to the master bedroom, there was a note in Tiffany's bubbly handwriting: walk-in closet, turn into gaming nook for D. They had planned it all out. They had mentally divided up my life while I was working to pay for it. Then I found another piece of paper. It was a printout from a legal website. Squatters' rights in the state of, and how to establish residency to prevent eviction. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a renovation. This was a calculated legal maneuver. They wanted to move in, stay long enough to establish residency, usually 30 days, or immediately if they could prove they lived there, and then force me to go through a months-long eviction process to get them out. And during that time, they would make my life hell until I paid them to leave. It was a hostile takeover. I looked at the date on the printout. It was from 2 months ago. 2 months. They had been planning this since the day I refused to give them the $100,000. The Thanksgiving theft wasn't impulsive. It was the next step in a timeline. I realized then that I needed more than just locks and cameras. I needed a lawyer. A shark. I needed someone who could destroy them legally before they could destroy me financially. I remembered a name. Vance. He was a corporate litigator my firm used for contract disputes. He was expensive, cold, and utterly ruthless. I had always been a little afraid of him. Now, he sounded like exactly the kind of person I needed. I sent an email to his work address, marking it urgent. Subject: immediate eviction and restraining order assistance needed. Family matter involving property damage and criminal trespass. I put the phone down and stared at the camera feed again. The street was dark. The neighborhood was sleeping. But I knew they were out there. Desperate people don't just give up. They escalate. Derek's gambling debts. Frank's homelessness. Tiffany's jealousy. It was a powder keg, and I had just lit the match by kicking them out. I didn't know how they would retaliate, but I knew they would. Around 2 a.m., my phone chimed. Not a text. A notification from the security app. Motion detected driveway camera. I froze. I tapped the notification. On the screen, in the eerie green and white of the night vision mode, a car rolled silently to a stop at the curb, lights off. It was Derek's sedan. 3 figures got out. They were dressed in dark clothes. Tiffany, Derek, and Frank. Derek was carrying something heavy in his right hand. It looked like a crowbar. But it was what Frank was carrying that made my heart stop beating altogether. It was a red plastic canister. Gasoline. I watched, paralyzed with horror, as they crept up the driveway, avoiding the motion sensor lights by sticking to the shadows of the hedges, shadows that existed before I cut them back, but they didn't know I had installed the new cameras. They weren't here to move in. They weren't here to talk. They were here to burn it down. I stared at the phone screen, my breath trapped in my lungs like a bird in a cage. The green-tinted night vision of the camera made the scene look like a grainy horror movie, but the threat was terrifyingly real. Frank was unscrewing the red cap of the canister. Derek was testing the weight of the crowbar in his hand, tapping it menacingly against his leg. Tiffany was whispering something, pointing toward the wooden lattice that supported my porch, the driest, most flammable part of the house's exterior. They weren't trying to break in silently anymore. They were going to burn me out. Or worse, burn me in. My finger hovered over the panic button on the security app. Time seemed to warp, stretching into an agonizing slow motion. I saw Frank tip the canister. I saw the dark liquid splash onto the white wood of my porch steps. It stained the pristine paint instantly. He splashed it over the crushed remains of my hydrangeas, soaking the dead petals in accelerant. Then, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a silver Zippo lighter. I knew that lighter. It was a gift I had bought him for Christmas 5 years ago, back when I still thought I could buy their love. He flicked the lid open. A tiny flame danced in the darkness. "Do it," I heard Tiffany hiss through the camera's microphone. Her voice was distorted but unmistakable. "Burn the bitch out." That was the moment the last thread of sisterhood snapped. It didn't break with a sad twang, it severed with the brutal finality of a guillotine. I pressed the button. The reaction was instantaneous and earth-shattering. The siren I had installed, a 120 decibel industrial alarm, screamed into the night. It was a sound so loud it vibrated in my teeth, a physical force that punched through the walls. Simultaneously, the floodlights I had angled perfectly at the porch blazed to life. 1 second, they were shrouded in comforting darkness, the next, they were pinned under 5,000 lumens of blinding, stark white light. On the screen, the effect was chaotic satisfaction. Frank jumped as if he'd been shot. The lighter flew out of his hand, landing harmlessly on the concrete driveway, feet away from the gasoline-soaked wood. He scrambled back, shielding his eyes from the glare, looking like a cockroach caught when the kitchen lights flip on. Derek dropped the crowbar. It clattered loudly on the pavement. He spun around, looking for a place to run, but he was blinded, disoriented by the noise and the light. Tiffany screamed. I couldn't hear her over the siren, but I saw her mouth open wide, her hands flying up to cover her ears. She looked like a trapped rat. And then, the red and blue lights arrived. I hadn't needed to call them again. The security company had dispatched them the moment the motion sensors at the perimeter were triggered, just as I had instructed them to do when I set up the account hours earlier. Plus, I had already filed the report about the threat. The patrol car was likely just around the corner, waiting for this exact moment. 2 police cruisers screeched to a halt at the bottom of the driveway, blocking Derek's sedan. 4 officers spilled out, guns drawn, their voices adding to the cacophony. "Police! Drop to the ground! Now!" I watched from the safety of my living room, trembling not with fear, but with adrenaline. I stood up, walked to the window, and pulled back the curtain just an inch. I saw my father-in-law, the man who had bullied me for years, face down on the asphalt, his hands behind his head. I saw my brother-in-law, the fake entrepreneur, sobbing as an officer cuffed him. And I saw my sister. Tiffany was trying to argue. Even with a gun pointed at her, even bathed in floodlights with the smell of gasoline thick in the air, she was trying to talk her way out of it. She was pointing at the house, screaming something about her property. The officer wasn't listening. He grabbed her wrist, spun her around, and slammed her against the hood of the police car. The cold metal must have shocked her, because she finally went limp. I turned off the alarm. The silence that rushed back into the neighborhood was ringing and heavy. I unlocked the front door and stepped out onto the porch. The smell of gasoline was overpowering. It made my eyes water and my throat sting. The lead officer, a tall woman with a stern face, looked up from where she was reading Frank his rights. She saw me standing there, barefoot, in my pajamas, holding a baseball bat just in case. "Ma'am," she called out. "Are you Mallory?" "Yes," I said. My voice was steady, clearer than it had ever been. "I'm the homeowner. And I want to press charges. All of them. Frank lifted his head from the pavement, gravel sticking to his cheek. "Mallory," he roared, a desperate, animalistic sound. Tell them it's a misunderstanding. We were just scaring you. We're family." I looked at the gasoline soaking into the wood of my porch. I looked at the lighter lying on the ground. I looked at the crowbar. Then I looked Frank dead in the eye. "I don't know who you are," I said, loud enough for the neighbors peering through their blinds to hear. "I don't have a family. I only have trespassers." The next few hours were a blur of flashing lights, yellow crime scene tape, and official statements. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My house, my sanctuary, was now a crime scene. A fire marshal arrived to assess the gasoline spill. He was a grisly man who had seen too many tragedies. He told me, with grim professionalism, that if Frank had dropped that lighter just 2 feet to the left, the fumes would have ignited instantly. The fire would have climbed the lattice, reached the attic vents, and consumed the roof in minutes. Given the layout of my house and where I was sleeping in the living room, the smoke inhalation would have incapacitated me before I even reached the door. "You're lucky, ma'am," he said, shaking his head as he bagged the Zippo lighter. "This wasn't a prank. This was an execution attempt." Hearing it said out loud crystallized the horror. They weren't just greedy. They were willing to kill me. They valued my property more than my life. Around 4 a.m., I drove to the police station. I needed to give my formal statement while the events were fresh. The station was cold, smelling of stale coffee and floor wax, a smell that will forever trigger a pit in my stomach. As I sat in the waiting room, I saw Mrs. Higgins, my neighbor. She was wrapped in a bathrobe, talking to the desk sergeant. I saw everything, she was saying, waving her cane for emphasis. "That man, the fat one, he had a gas can. I have it on my Ring camera too. They've been terrorizing this poor girl all day. They smashed her flowers." I walked over and hugged her. I broke down then, just for a moment, sobbing into her fuzzy bathrobe. It took a stranger's kindness to unlock the tears that my family's cruelty had frozen. "I've got you, dear," she whispered, patting my back. "We've all got you. You aren't alone." Inside the interrogation rooms, the story was unraveling. Detective Miller, the officer assigned to the case, briefed me after I gave my statement. He looked exhausted and disgusted. "Your sister is quite a character," Miller said, taking a sip of coffee. "She's singing a very different tune than the men." "What is she saying?" I asked, bracing myself. "She claims she was a hostage," Miller said, raising an eyebrow. "Says her husband and father-in-law forced her to come. Says she was trying to talk them out of it. She claims she was screaming 'Don't do it' when the alarm went off. She's painting herself as the victim who was just trying to protect her sister's house from the bad men. I let out a short, bitter laugh. It was so Tiffany. Even in handcuffs, she was trying to triangulate, to manipulate, to play the damsel. "I have audio from the security camera, detective," she said. "Burn the bitch out. I can send you the file right now." Miller's eyes lit up. "Please do. That nails the coffin shut." He paused, looking at his notes, his expression growing more serious. "There's something else. Your brother-in-law, Derek. He's sweating bullets. He keeps asking to be put in protective custody. He says if he goes to general population at the county jail, he's a dead man. Says he owes money to people who have reached inside. Gambling? I guessed. Looks like it. Big time. And the father. Frank. He's just sitting there spitting insults. Calling you every name in the book. He seems to think this is all a big mistake that you're going to fix in the morning. He actually asked the officer to bring him a phone so he could order you to drop the charges. He's delusional, I said. He's a narcissist, Miller corrected. And right now, he's a narcissist facing 3 counts of attempted aggravated arson, conspiracy to commit murder, and possession of burglary tools. He's not going home, Ms. Mallory. None of them are. But then Miller hesitated. There is one complication. Tiffany is claiming she is pregnant. She says the stress of the arrest is causing her cramping. We had to have a medic check her out, but she refused a full exam, demanding to see her own doctor. If she's pregnant, the judge might go easy on bail. She's lying, I said immediately. She uses pregnancy as a get-out-of-jail-free card. She used it to try and guilt me into giving her money yesterday. We need proof, Mallory. Unless we have medical proof she isn't, the court has to treat her claim with caution. I left the station as the sun was coming up. The sky was a bruised purple, lightening to a pale, cold yellow. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time, watching the sunrise. I felt a strange cocktail of emotions, relief that I was alive, grief for the sister I used to have, and a burning resolve to ensure they didn't wiggle out of this. I thought about the times I had driven Tiffany to soccer practice. I thought about buying Derek a suit for his job interviews. I thought about the Christmas gifts, the loans, the emotional energy I had poured into a black hole. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from Facebook. Then another. Then a text. The sun was up, which meant the world was waking up. And Tiffany, even from a holding cell, or perhaps she had used her one phone call to rally the troops, had managed to light a different kind of fire. I opened the first notification. It was a post on our hometown community page, posted by Tiffany's best friend, Jessica. Urgent, please pray for Tiffany and her family. Last night, her unstable, wealthy sister attacked them when they went to check on her house. Mallory has always been jealous of Tiffany's happiness. She called the cops and lied, saying they were burglars. Now a pregnant woman is in jail. This is abuse of power. Hashtag justice for Tiffany. The comments were already rolling in. OMG, isn't Mallory that stuck-up consultant? Rich people think they can do anything. Arresting a pregnant woman? That's sick. The smear campaign had begun. The digital age has weaponized gossip. In the old days, a family scandal would be whispered about over fences. Now, it was broadcast in real time to thousands of strangers who loved nothing more than a villain to hate. And according to Tiffany's narrative, I was the ultimate villain, the rich, barren spinster destroying the young, struggling family. By noon, my phone was practically vibrating off the table. Calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Texts from distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in a decade. Aunt Linda, a woman who had ignored me at my mother's funeral but ate 3 plates of food at the wake, left a voicemail that lasted 4 minutes. Mallory, this is Linda. I am shaking right now. Shaking. I just heard from Jessica that you put Tiffany in a cage. A cage. She is your flesh and blood. I don't care what she did, you do not call the police on family. You go down there, you pay her bail, and you apologize. You are shaming your mother's memory. She is watching you from heaven and she is weeping. Weeping. I saved the voicemail. Not to listen to it again, but as evidence of harassment. Then came the concerned friends. People from high school who I hadn't seen in 15 years were suddenly sliding into my DMs. Hey Mal, saw the post, is it true you evicted them? That seems kinda harsh, hun. Maybe you should hear her out? It was maddening. They didn't know about the crowbar. They didn't know about the gasoline. They only knew the version Tiffany's allies were spinning, that the rich, heartless sister threw the struggling, young couple out into the cold because of a misunderstanding about a renovation. But the worst part wasn't the strangers. It was the people who should have known better. My cousin Sarah, someone I had helped pay for college textbooks just 2 years ago, posted a status, "Money changes people. Never forget where you came from." Some people get a little bit of success and forget loyalty. I felt like I was being stabbed by 1,000 tiny needles. I wanted to reply to every single comment. I wanted to post the video of Frank pouring gasoline. I wanted to post the audio of Tiffany saying "burn the bitch out." I wanted to scream the truth from the rooftops. But I didn't. I remembered what lawyer Vance had told me in our brief consultation: do not engage. Do not post. Do not defend yourself in the court of public opinion yet. Save it for the court of law. Let them dig their hole. Anything they post can be used to show a pattern of harassment and lack of remorse. So I stayed silent. I let the mud stick. I let them paint me as a monster. But silence is hard when you're isolated. I couldn't stay at my house, the police were still processing the scene, and frankly, the smell of gas made me nauseous. I checked into a hotel downtown, a place with high security and anonymity. I sat in that sterile hotel room, watching the comments roll in on my iPad. It felt like a digital lynch mob. They were dissecting my life, my career, my choices. They called me cold. They called me ugly inside and out. They speculated that I was jealous of Tiffany's pregnancy because I couldn't keep a man. That night, alone in the hotel, I realized the full extent of Tiffany's power. She didn't have money. She didn't have a job. But she had the ability to weaponize victimhood. She knew exactly which buttons to push to make society feel sorry for her. She was a master of the missing reasons, telling a story where the other person's reaction seems crazy because she leaves out the horrific thing she did to cause it. Around 10 p.m., my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but local. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mallory? It was a voice I hadn't heard in years. It was Mark, Derek's younger brother. The black sheep of their family who had moved away years ago to get away from Frank. Mark? I asked, surprised. I saw the news, Mark said. His voice was low. And I saw the Facebook posts. Listen, Mallory, I know they're lying. You do? Yeah. Frank called me from jail. Used his one call to try and guilt me into putting up my house for his bail. He told me what happened. He admitted they brought the gas. I gripped the phone tighter. He admitted it? He's proud of it, in a sick way. He thinks he was teaching you a lesson. Listen, Mallory, don't let them bully you. Frank has done this before. What do you mean? 10 years ago. Before Derek met Tiffany. Frank had a business partner he felt cheated him. That guy's garage burned down mysteriously. They never pinned it on Frank, but we all knew. He uses fire when he feels disrespected. You need to bury them, Mallory. If they get out, they won't stop. Mark's call was a lifeline. It confirmed that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the villain. I was dealing with generational toxicity. I thanked him and hung up. Then I called Vance's office and left a message. We need to look into Frank's history. And we need to expedite the forensic accounting. I want to know everything they've ever done. I went to sleep that night not with tears, but with a cold, hard plan. The smear campaign was annoying, yes. But while they were fighting on Facebook, I was going to fight in the courtroom. And I was bringing a bazooka to a knife fight. The next morning, the sun was shining, but my world felt gray. I dressed in my sharpest suit, putting on my crisis manager armor. I was no longer Mallory the sister. I was Mallory the plaintiff. I arrived at Vance's office at 9 a.m. sharp. Vance was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite, sharp features, expensive suit, and eyes that miss nothing. He didn't offer me tea or sympathy. He offered me strategy, which was exactly what I needed. We have the video, Vance said, tapping a tablet on his mahogany desk. We have the audio. The police report is solid. The attempted aggravated arson charge is a Class A felony. They are looking at 10 to 20 years, minimum. Frank has prior assaults from the 90s. Derek has fraud charges. They aren't getting bail easily. What about Tiffany? I asked, sitting on the edge of the leather chair. Everyone keeps talking about the pregnancy. It's her shield. Vance smiled, a thin, razor-sharp expression that made me glad he was on my side. Yes, the pregnancy. The magical shield. I took the liberty of subpoenaing her medical records, anticipating this defense. Given that you share a family insurance plan which you pay for, a detail we will definitely bring up, access was straightforward. He slid a manila folder across the desk. Tiffany isn't pregnant, Mallory. She hasn't been to an OBGYN in 3 years. In fact, according to a consultation she had last year regarding irregular periods, she has a condition that makes natural conception extremely difficult. Not impossible, but highly unlikely without IVF. And there are no records of IVF. I stared at the file, feeling a mix of vindication and disgust. She lied. She lied to get money for the house. She lied to the police. She lied to the entire internet. She lied to everyone, Vance confirmed. And we are going to use that. But there's something bigger here. The motive. Why burn the house? Why not just steal from you? Why not just squat? They hate me, I said. They resent that I have money. Hate isn't enough for arson, Vance shook his head. Arson is desperate. Arson is I need this problem to disappear right now. I did some digging into Derek's financials. And yours. He opened another file. This one was thicker, filled with spreadsheets and highlighted bank statements. Your brother-in-law is in a hole so deep he can see the Earth's core. He owes $250,000 to an illegal sports betting ring operating out of Jersey. The deadline for payment was yesterday. The day they broke in. I felt the blood drain from my face. Yesterday? Exactly. Their plan wasn't just to squat. They needed an asset. They likely planned to forge your signature on a quitclaim deed, which Derek has downloaded templates for on his laptop, transfer the title to Tiffany, and then take out a predatory hard money loan against the equity of your house to pay the shark. Or, sell it quick for cash to a we buy ugly houses flipper. But when I came back early, I whispered, connecting the dots. You ruined the timeline, Vance finished. They couldn't transfer the title if you were there screaming. So, plan B, burn it down. How does burning it help them? Life insurance, Vance said chillingly. He pulled out a document I hadn't seen in years. It was an old policy my parents had taken out on me when I was a child, which I had taken over paying for. The beneficiary was still listed as parents, with Tiffany as the contingent beneficiary if they passed. I forgot about this, I admitted. It's only for $100,000. That doesn't cover Derek's debt. No, Vance said. But this one does. He slid a second policy across the desk. It was a policy for $1 million. Taken out 6 months ago. The signature at the bottom was Mallory, but it wasn't my handwriting. It was Tiffany's loops. She forged a policy on my life? I gasped. She forged it, and she paid the premiums using the rent money you loaned her, Vance said. If you died in that fire, Mallory, Tiffany would inherit the house and $1 million tax-free. She pays the debt, buys a mansion, and lives happily ever after on your ashes. The room spun. I had to grip the arms of the chair to keep from falling. This wasn't just a family dispute. This was a premeditated assassination plot. My sister, the girl I had protected from bullies on the playground, had been paying premiums on my death for 6 months. Every time she smiled at me, every time she asked for money, she was waiting for me to die. They are monsters, I whispered. They are criminals, Vance corrected. And we are going to bury them. He then pulled out the final piece of the puzzle. We also looked into the credit cards. They opened 3 in your name 2 years ago. Maxed them out. $40,000. They've been paying the minimums to keep your credit score from tanking so you wouldn't notice. But the payments stopped last month. The default notices were going to a P.O. box Derek rented. I looked at the numbers. The sheer scale of the theft was staggering. I had been working 80-hour weeks, sacrificing my health, my social life, my sleep, to build a future. And the whole time, they were siphoning off my blood like leeches. What's the plan? I asked, my voice hardening into steel. The arraignment is tomorrow, Vance said. We let them play their hand. We let Tiffany cry about her baby. We let them think they have a chance. And then, we drop the hammer. We reveal the medical records. We reveal the insurance policy. We reveal the gambling debt. We don't just win, Mallory. We annihilate their defense. I left Vance's office feeling heavier, yet stronger. The confusion was gone. I wasn't wondering why anymore. I knew why. It was greed. Pure, distilled greed. And now that I knew the enemy, I knew exactly how to destroy them. The arraignment hearing was 2 days later. The courthouse was buzzing. The local news had picked up the story, thanks to the dramatic police report and the social media firestorm Tiffany's friends had started. Wealthy sister versus homeless pregnant sister was a headline that sold clicks. I wasn't required to be there, but Vance insisted. They need to see you, he said. They need to see that you aren't hiding. And the judge needs to see the victim is a real person, not the monster Facebook says you are. I wore my sharpest suit, a charcoal armor. I sat in the front row behind the prosecutor. I kept my face blank, showing no emotion. When the bailiff led them in, the change in their demeanor was shocking. Frank looked deflated. His bravado had evaporated without alcohol and an audience. He wore an orange jumpsuit that strained at the buttons. He looked old and pathetic, refusing to look at the gallery. Derek was shaking. Visibly shaking. He kept glancing at the back of the room, scanning the faces in the audience. He looked like a man who knew he was safer in jail than on the street where his creditors were waiting. And Tiffany. Tiffany played the part of the tragic heroine perfectly. She had washed her face, leaving it pale and clean. She wore a baggy jumpsuit and kept her hands protectively on her stomach, rubbing it gently. She looked at the judge with wide, tear-filled eyes. She looked at the gallery and gave a weak, brave smile to Jessica, who was sitting there with a Free Tiffany sign. The prosecutor read the charges. Attempted aggravated arson. Conspiracy to commit murder. Burglary. Possession of incendiary devices. Identity theft. Insurance fraud. A collective gasp went through the courtroom at the list of charges. Tiffany's public defender stood up. He looked overworked and tired. Your Honor, my client is a victim of circumstance. She is a pregnant woman who was coerced by her abusive father-in-law. She poses no flight risk. We ask for release on her own recognizance so she can receive proper prenatal care. Jail is no place for an expectant mother. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Patterson with glasses perched on the end of her nose, looked down at Tiffany. Pregnant? Yes, Your Honor, Tiffany whispered, her voice trembling just enough to be audible. 8 weeks. I'm so scared for my baby in here. The food is terrible, and I'm cramping. It was a masterful performance. I saw people in the gallery nodding sympathetically. Even the judge softened slightly. Your Honor, Vance stood up. He wasn't the criminal prosecutor, but he had been granted permission to speak on behalf of the victim regarding the restraining order and bail conditions. May I approach? Make it quick, counselor. Vance walked to the bench. He handed the judge a single piece of paper. The medical record. The victim contends that the defendant is perpetrating a fraud upon this court, Vance said, his voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. We have provided recent medical records indicating the defendant is not pregnant. Furthermore, we have sworn affidavits from the insurance provider confirming no prenatal visits and a diagnosis of infertility that contradicts her claim. The judge frowned. She read the paper. Then she looked at Tiffany. The softness was gone, replaced by the cold steel of judicial fury. Ms. Tiffany, the judge said. Do you have proof of this pregnancy? A doctor's note? An ultrasound? A blood test from the jail medic? Tiffany froze. Her hand stopped rubbing her stomach. She looked at her lawyer, panic rising in her eyes. I took a home test. It was positive. I haven't seen a doctor yet because my sister had me arrested. Liar! The scream didn't come from me. It came from Derek. Derek stood up, rattling his chains. He couldn't take it anymore. She's lying. She's been lying about it for months to get money out of her sister. She told me she was on the pill. She's not pregnant. She just says that to get people to feel sorry for her. Shut up, Derek! Tiffany shrieked, spinning around to face him. Her tragic mask shattered, revealing the snarling face I had seen in my kitchen. You useless coward! This is your fault. You and your stupid gambling debts. You dragged me into this. Order! The judge banged her gavel. Order in the court! He was going to kill her. Tiffany yelled, pointing at Frank now, throwing everyone under the bus to save herself. Frank said we had to burn it. He said Mallory was worth more dead because of the insurance policy. I tried to stop them. You handed me the lighter. Frank roared, lunging at her before the bailiffs grabbed him. You said burn the bitch out. I heard you. I ain't going down alone for this. It was chaos. It was ugly. It was the implosion of a family built on lies. I sat there, perfectly still. I watched them tear each other apart. The united front had lasted less than 48 hours. Confronted with consequences, they turned into rats in a bucket. The judge hammered the gavel until the room fell silent. Her face was red with anger. Enough, she bellowed. I have heard enough. Bail is denied for all three defendants. You represent a clear and present danger to the victim and to the community. And Ms. Tiffany, if you lie to this court again, I will hold you in contempt faster than you can blink. As they were dragged out, Frank cursing, Derek weeping, Tiffany screaming that she was being framed, Tiffany locked eyes with me. For a second, the mask dropped completely. There was no fear. No regret. Just pure, unadulterated malice. She mouthed a word at me. Dead. I didn't flinch. I just turned to Vance. Did you get that? I asked. The bailiff heard it, Vance nodded, writing something down. That's another charge. Witness intimidation. And threats against a victim. We're stacking the deck, Mallory. I walked out of the courthouse into a swarm of cameras. The local news reporters were shouting my name. Mallory! Is it true your sister isn't pregnant? Did she really forge life insurance policies? I stopped. I looked directly into the camera lens. I thought about the smear campaign. I thought about Aunt Linda's voicemail. I thought about the thousands of strangers judging me. My sister, I said clearly, my voice cutting through the noise, is not pregnant. She and her husband owe a gambling syndicate $250,000. They tried to burn me alive in my own home to collect on a life insurance policy they forged in my name. The only thing I evicted was evil. I walked to my car, leaving the reporters in a stunned silence. The narrative had flipped. And this time, I held the pen. The weeks following the arraignment were a slow, grinding process of dismantling their lives. With the pregnancy lie debunked and the gambling debt exposed on the news, the public tide turned violently. The Justice for Tiffany page was deleted overnight. Jessica, the friend who started it, posted a vague status about being manipulated by sociopaths and then went private. The flying monkeys went silent. But the real work was happening behind the scenes. Vance called me into his office a week later. "We have a development," he said. "Frank is trying to cut a deal." "What kind of deal?" I asked. I was tired. The adrenaline had faded, leaving just a deep, aching exhaustion. "He's offering to testify against Derek and Tiffany. He claims Derek planned the whole arson and Tiffany bought the gas. He says he was just the driver and was peer-pressured into holding the lighter." I snorted. Peer-pressured? He's 60 years old. I know. It's pathetic. But here's the interesting part. Frank is terrified. Not of prison, but of who Derek owes money to. He told the DA that there's a contract out on Derek inside. Frank wants to be separated from his son. He thinks if he's in the same cell block, he'll be collateral damage when the hit happens. Is the threat real? Very, Vance said. The betting ring Derek used is connected to the mob in New Jersey. They don't like it when people don't pay, and they like it even less when their debtors get arrested and draw police attention to their operation. Derek is a loose end. So Frank is throwing his own son to the wolves to save his skin. Exactly. And we're going to use that. The DA is going to take Frank's statement, but not for a deal. They're going to use it to squeeze Derek. And Derek? Derek is the weak link, Vance said, leaning back. He's not a criminal mastermind. He's a screw-up. He's scared, he's broke, and now he knows his dad turned on him. We just need to push him a little harder, and he'll give us Tiffany. Why do we need him to give us Tiffany? We have the video. The video shows her there. It shows her saying burn her out. But her lawyer is going to argue she was in shock, or speaking metaphorically, or having a mental break. We need Derek to testify that she planned it. We need him to confirm she forged the insurance policy. We need him to confirm she bought the gas. We need premeditation to make the attempted murder charge stick. I nodded. Do it. Squeeze him. 2 days later, Derek cracked. Vance sent me the transcript of the confession. Reading it was like staring into the abyss of human selfishness. Detective, so the plan was to kill her? Derek, no. I mean, maybe. Frank said if she woke up, we'd have to handle it. But the plan was just the fire. We thought if the house burned down, she'd be dead or she'd leave. If she died, Tiff gets the insurance money. If she leaves, we just squat on the land. Detective, and the gas? Derek, Tiff bought it. She paid cash at the Shell station on 4th Street. She said, make sure you get enough to soak the porch. She was obsessed with it. She said Mallory embarrassed her. She said Mallory thought she was better than us. She wanted to hurt her. Frank just wanted the money. Tiff wanted to see it burn. Detective, and the insurance policy? Derek, Tiff did that last Christmas. She practiced Mallory's signature for a week. She said it was her retirement plan. I put the transcript down, feeling sick. Her retirement plan. My death was her retirement plan. All those times she hugged me. All those times she said, I love you, sis. She was just checking to see if I was dead yet. We have everything we need, Vance said. Derek's confession corroborates the physical evidence. Tiffany is done. Her lawyer is already asking for a plea deal. No deals, I said. I want her to stand in front of a judge and hear what she did. Mallory, a trial is expensive and emotional. No deals, I repeated. She wanted to burn me. I want her to feel the heat. The trial, or rather, the sentencing hearing, since they all eventually pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty or life without parole, took place 3 months later. It was a crisp spring day. The hydrangeas in my garden were gone, dug up and replaced by fresh soil, waiting for new life. I walked into the courtroom feeling a strange sense of calm. The fear was gone. The anger had burned itself out, leaving only a hard, gray resolve. The courtroom was packed. The media was there. My family was there, in shackles. Frank looked like a skeleton. He had lost 30 pounds. He stared at the floor. Derek looked terrified, constantly twitching. Tiffany looked broken. The prison uniform hung off her. Her hair was dull. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not the fake damsel fear, but the primal fear of an animal caught in a trap. The judge asked if I wanted to give a victim impact statement. I stood up. I walked to the podium. I didn't have a piece of paper. I didn't need notes. I spoke from the scar tissue on my heart. Your Honor, I began, my voice steady. For 15 years, I thought family was a verb. I thought it was something you did. You support, you forgive, you help. I sacrificed my own happiness, my financial security, and my peace of mind to be a safety net for my sister. I looked at Tiffany. She flinched. But I learned that for Tiffany, family is a noun. It's just a word she uses to open doors she didn't earn. It's a weapon she uses to silence victims. She didn't just try to burn down my house. She tried to burn down my life. She stole my identity. She stole my mother's legacy. She forged a policy on my life and waited for me to die. I took a deep breath. She isn't a victim. She isn't a child who made a mistake. She is a grown woman who made a choice to destroy her own blood for money and spite. I don't hate her. I pity her. But I refuse to be her victim anymore. I ask the court for the maximum sentence. Not for revenge, but for safety. Because as long as she is free, she will find someone else to burn. The courtroom was silent. You could hear a pin drop. Tiffany had her head down, sobbing quietly. This time, nobody believed the tears. The judge adjusted her glasses. She looked at the 3 defendants with utter contempt. Mr. Frank Miller, the judge intoned. You are the patriarch. You should have been the voice of reason. Instead, you were the ringleader of a violent, greedy plot. For attempted aggravated arson and conspiracy to commit murder, I sentence you to 25 years in state prison. Frank didn't scream. He just closed his eyes. At 60 years old, 25 years was a life sentence. He would likely die in a concrete box. Mr. Derek Miller, the judge continued. You cooperated, which saves you from the maximum. But you betrayed your wife's sister and participated in a horrific crime. I sentence you to 15 years. Derek nodded, tears streaming down his face. He looked relieved. 15 years in protective custody was better than being killed by loan sharks on the street. Then the judge turned to Tiffany. Tiffany Miller. You have shown a staggering lack of remorse until the moment you were caught. You manipulated your family. You stole from your sister for years. You forged documents. And you commanded the destruction of a home with a callousness that chills this court. You are the architect of this tragedy. Tiffany stood up, trembling. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Mallory. Save it, the judge snapped. You are sentenced to 18 years in state prison for arson, fraud, identity theft, and attempted murder. You will also be required to pay restitution to the victim in the amount of $300,000 for the damages and theft, to be garnished from any future wages. 18 years. She would be 50 years old when she got out. Her youth, the thing she valued so much, would be spent wearing a gray uniform, scrubbing floors, and following orders. As the bailiff handcuffed her, she looked back at me one last time. "Mallory," she cried out. "Mallory, please. Who will visit me? Who will put money on my books? I have nobody." It was the most Tiffany thing she could have said. Even now, facing prison, she was worried about who would fund her commissary account. She wasn't sorry she did it, she was sorry she lost her ATM. I looked at her, and I felt nothing. The cord was cut. "Goodbye, Tiffany," I said softly. I turned my back and walked out of the courtroom. The heavy wooden doors swung shut behind me with a solid, final thud. Time moves differently when you are free. But the trauma doesn't disappear just because the gavel bangs. For the first year, I received letters from Tiffany. At first, they were angry. Blaming me. "You ruined my life. You have everything and you couldn't share." Then they were begging. She wanted money for shampoo, for snacks, for phone calls. She complained about the food. She complained about her cellmate. "It's so cold here, Mal. The blankets are scratchy. Please, just send me $50. I know you have it. Don't be cruel." I never opened them. I recognized the handwriting on the envelopes, the loopy, bubbly script that used to sign my birthday cards. I collected them in a shoebox, unopened, for 6 months. Then, on the anniversary of the fire, I took the box to the backyard fire pit I had built. It was a clear, cold night. I lit a match, my own match this time, not Frank's Zippo, and watched them burn. It was a ceremonial cleansing. I watched her handwriting turn to ash and float up into the night sky. I wasn't burning my sister. I was burning the obligation. I was burning the guilt. Vance kept me updated on the rest, a grim newsletter of their decline. Frank wasn't doing well. His health was failing, and prison healthcare was minimal. He had no friends inside. He was just a bitter old man dying alone, exactly as he deserved. Derek had apparently found religion. Or at least, a jailhouse version of it. He was working in the library. He sent a letter of apology to my lawyer to pass to me. Vance read it and said, "It seems sincere, but it changes nothing. He's sorry he got caught." I told him to shred it. Tiffany was having the hardest time. She had always defined herself by her looks and her ability to manipulate men. In a women's prison, those currencies were worthless. She had to work. Real, hard labor. Laundry duty. Scrubbing floors. I heard from a mutual acquaintance, one of the few who had apologized sincerely and whom I had kept in contact with, that Tiffany looked 10 years older. She was gray. She was tired. The sparkle of entitlement was gone, replaced by the dull sheen of survival. She had lost everything. Her husband, who divorced her from prison to protect himself. Her freedom. Her future. And most importantly, she had lost her victim. Without me to feed off, she was starving. I realized that my mother's promise, to take care of Tiffany, had been fulfilled in a twisted way. Tiffany was now in the care of the state. She had a roof over her head. She had food. She was safe from her own bad decisions. I had saved her, by stopping her. Life on the outside flourished. With the legal battle over and the parasites removed, my finances recovered quickly. I wasn't bleeding money into their bottomless pit anymore. The restitution checks from the court were meager, pennies Tiffany earned from prison labor, but I framed the first one. It wasn't about the dollar amount, it was for $1.15. It was about the principle. For the first time in her life, Tiffany was paying me back. I took a sabbatical from work. 3 months. I needed to decompress. I needed to find out who Mallory was when she wasn't in crisis mode. I spent the money I would have spent on Tiffany's bail or Derek's debts on myself. I traveled. I went to Italy, to the very factory where my tiles were made, and watched the artisans paint. I bought new tiles. When I returned, I renovated the kitchen again. But this time, I made it different. I didn't restore it to exactly how it was. That felt like trying to go back in time, trying to recreate a Mallory who didn't exist anymore. I made it better. Brighter. I knocked down a wall, on my own terms, to let more light in. I built a massive island, not for show, but because I had started taking cooking classes. I replanted the garden. The hydrangeas came back, bigger and bluer than before, fed by the new soil. I planted roses too. Thorns and beauty. A reminder that you need defenses to protect what is precious. I started dating again. A nice man. An architect named David. He didn't need my money. He had his own house. He admired my strength. When I told him the story of my family, he didn't judge me. He didn't say, "But she's your sister." He just held my hand and said, "You survived. That makes you a warrior." It was a strange feeling, being with someone who wanted to give to me, rather than take. It took me a long time to stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. To stop waiting for him to ask for a loan. But slowly, the flinching stopped. I hosted Thanksgiving that year. Just a small group. David, Mrs. Higgins, who is now like a surrogate grandmother to me, and a few close friends. We sat around the new island, drinking wine and laughing. The house was warm. It smelled of sage and roasted turkey. There was no tension. No walking on eggshells. No guarding my purse. I looked around the room and realized that I had finally built the family I wanted. Family isn't blood. Blood is just biology. Family is the people who respect your boundaries, who celebrate your joy, and who stand by you when the house is burning down, not the ones holding the gasoline. Sometimes, I still have nightmares. I dream of the smell of gas. I dream of Frank's face in the floodlight, twisted in hate. I dream of the weight of the phone in my hand as I hesitated to press the alarm button. But then I wake up. I'm in my bed. The digital lock on my door is secure. The cameras are watching the perimeter. My house is silent and safe. I walk down to the kitchen in the dark. I run my hand over the cool marble counter. I look out the window at the moon lighting up the garden. I am 37 years old. I have scars, both invisible and financial. But I am free. I learned the hard way that you cannot save people who are determined to drown. You cannot keep someone warm by setting yourself on fire. To anyone listening to this who feels trapped by family obligation, who feels like they are the designated fixer, the doormat, the bank, listen to me. No is a complete sentence. Your boundaries are not insults. Your success is not a debt you owe to those who failed. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do, for them and for yourself, is to let them face the consequences of their own actions. My sister wanted to move into my house. She wanted my life. Well, she got a new house. It has concrete walls and bars on the windows. And she has 18 years to think about the difference between a gift and a theft. As for me, I'm going to go water my flowers. They are blooming beautifully this year. This is Mallory, signing off. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to cut off a toxic family member to save yourself, I want to hear from you. You are not alone. Please like the video and share your story in the comments. Let's support each other. Goodbye. Mallory's journey reminds us that sometimes the most profound acts of self-love require the most difficult decisions. In a world that often romanticizes family bonds regardless of their toxicity, her story stands as a powerful testament to the courage it takes to redefine what family truly means. The boundaries we establish aren't walls of selfishness, but rather foundations of self-respect. When we allow others to repeatedly violate these boundaries in the name of family obligation, we don't just sacrifice our resources, we surrender our dignity and self-worth. The path to healing often begins when we recognize that we cannot save those who view our kindness as weakness. Mallory's transformation wasn't just about securing her home with cameras and locks, it was about fortifying her spirit against the manipulation that had drained her for years. True strength isn't measured by how much abuse we can endure, but by our ability to say enough when necessary. Sometimes, the most compassionate action, both for ourselves and for those who harm us, is to allow natural consequences to unfold, even when those consequences are painful. As you reflect on your own relationships, consider where you might be sacrificing your well-being on the altar of obligation. Are there boundaries you need to establish? Relationships you need to reassess? Remember that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's essential. Your worth isn't determined by how much you give to those who only take. If Mallory's story resonated with you, type good in the comments and share how you've learned to protect your own garden while still nurturing healthy connections in your life.